Hello, welcome to 3D drawing for your model railway. Now, here you can see obviously the model of the DTS62, which is completed, and it's fully completed, painted and transferred. I've had quite a few people asking me about the transfers, where I've got them from. When I explained I made them themselves, they asked if I would be making them available. I speak to a couple of people that actually thought like it was a good idea, rather than just giving the file away, to actually show people how I went about producing the transfers so they could do them for themselves, not just for this model, but for any other model they could, wish to copy or design themselves using 3D drawing. And there's no problem just giving it away and then you're only limited to what I've produced. You're better off being able to learn how to do the software. So there's various different ways you can do the transfers. Obviously, if you can find them from many of the reputable suppliers, then great, you can do that. I've actually contacted a couple of suppliers and asked them about certain transfers, and they, to be honest, they weren't really interested. They didn't think it was a big enough market to warrant the time being put into it. But they said if you did design them yourselves, then they would potentially look at producing them. So that is one option. The option I actually took, I designed them myself, and I had a mate who has a printer that was able to do them and print them at his house for me. And the results are pretty reasonable. Now, they're not perfect, they're probably not as good as what you can get from some of the bigger manufacturers, but it gives you a good option as something you could do at home and certainly be able to do on a reasonable budget. So the software I used was a software called Inkscape. That's completely free to use and download. You just need to come to their website, which is inkscape.org, and then download the current version that you require. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I'm no expert at using this software or making my own transfers. This is just something I've picked up in the last few weeks with the necessity of being able to make these transfers. Now, there is other options available, not just Inkscape. You could use Microsoft Paint. You could do things like PowerPoint or Microsoft Word, Adobe Illustrator. The list is endless. But when you wanted to do high quality images, you're really looking at using software that's designed for doing that. Microsoft Paint isn't very good. Word and Publisher, you're going to get pixelization. And especially if you're looking to send these off to some of the larger manufacturers who can produce transfers for you, they will want files in a format that is going to give the best output. They're not going to accept things that are drawn in Microsoft Paint because it's not going to be of good enough quality. So as I say, I'm no expert, so if anyone has got more experience of using this and wants to chip in and give us some suggestions, then I'm more than happy to listen to those suggestions and potentially turn those into videos so that all of us can learn as a group rather than just trying to muddle our way through. But it's one of these things. I just picked up the software and I tried giving it a go. I spent a few hours trying to work out how to do some things and really banging my head on the table, but I think they produced reasonably good looking transfers. So yeah, it's worth having a look at. So also something to consider when producing your own transfers is the majority of people that print them at home are not going to be able to print white at all. So generally you print colour on top of a clear transfer, or if you need something that's white, then you could use a white transfer paper. The issue with that is you're not going to be able to do things like numbers or lettering that are just white with no other background, because you're not going to be able to see them, you're not going to be able to cut them out. So things like this transfer in the middle here, or this red and white one, these are both printed on white transfer paper, but you can see the black lettering, black surround, or the red lettering in surround. They're able to be done, I say, on white, but if we're going to do things that are just like numbers, like this number 1 or 2 up here, you're not going to be able to print those yourself. You'd have to send them off to one of the specialist transfer providers. So if we jump across into Inkscape, we'll look at some basic stuff, and I think I'm going to start looking at the train that we produced a few lessons ago. A lot of the skills on that will also be transferable to be able to show you how to do things on here as well for the DTS62. So when you open up Inkscape, this is the basic screen you'll come and look at. It looks like most software. You've got things like the controls down the side, your menus across the top, and your colorings down the bottom here, things like that. One thing that I try to do is I like to work in millimeters. So you've got your different things you can select here. Again, I'm just selecting millimeters, and then come across to settings, try and remember where they were, document properties down here, and then you set up your document. So I've got this set on A4 in millimeters. Obviously the page is set correctly. The scale should try and keep your scale to 1:1. Background, you want the checkerboard background when you're doing anything on transfers, because you want to have a clear image. You want to be able to see what the transfer is actually going to look like. If we were to just use white, you potentially think that there's just white there, and actually there's not. You've got the guides here, so you can show you guides, the guide colours if you need them. Grids, now I've got a rectangular grid sat on. Again, play around with the preferences yourself. I've got snapping. Snap only when closer than, and I've set the settings here. These are defaults. Snap to grid is always on snap. These are all defaults that were set up. Color, there's no linked profiles or anything accepted in here. Same with scripts. Nothing's changed on the metadata, and you can see the license is just a proprietary thing here. Okay. So that's just your basic page. You can see how we've got this checkerboard now on the background, so that when we start to draw on here, we'll see what's coloured and what isn't coloured. Okay, so if we look at doing the crane, the first thing we're going to start to look at is if we say we'll look at just doing the number and the department identification on the side here. So again, you can see we're going to use black font on a clear background. The font that we're going to use, now the majority of British Rail fonts I think are Decals Sans. So all I did, because I don't necessarily have the font on my computer, is I just went and searched on the internet for British Rail font, and then done various different searches, and this website, strathpefferjunction.com, British Railway typefaces and fonts. So I scroll down, you've got Decals Sans British Railways era, so that's 1949, and then we've got the Rail alphabet, and you can see this font looks pretty much like what we're after. And there's two fonts in, and there's British Rail Light Normal and British Rail Dark Normal. You just download it, unzip it, double click on it, and automatically installs on your computer. And then once you've got it installed, you can then reopen Inkscape or Microsoft Word or whatever document you're using, and it will automatically find it. So obviously we've not really got any dimensions that we can say are definitive for this. So what we can do is we can jump into Fusion and sort of try and think, well, how big does it look on here? So you can see it's just off. It starts, roughly at the beginning of the wall here. Goes just maybe just slightly after this one. Look at the height, and just sort of dimension it roughly on here. So if we create a sketch on that same face, and just draw a box, and we're looking sort of maybe that size. Two side by side. Yeah, maybe about that sort of size. So if we just now have a look at this, we can dimension that. So that's 4.75 by 3.75. We jump into Inkscape. We've got various different things on the side. We've got a little box here. We can draw a box here. Just drag it out. And we know the size. We're going to want 4.75. Change it. 4.75 by 3.75. And then we can zoom in, and you can see how it's completely filled it in. Okay, so what we're going to actually do is change that. So if we come across the top here to objects and do fill and stroke, and then it'll open up a box on the side here. So we want no fill, but we want with a stroke. Now the stroke essentially is just going to put a line around the outside. That's feel set. Stroke style, we want a solid line. Let's just make it, say, 1 millimeter. There we go, 0.12. Okay, we can live with that. So that's the width of the line around the outside. We just click and close there and escape. So now we know what the size of our box is. We can then just transpose the font into it. So if we look at this and we just have them two side by side, so we're going to have ADRC at the top. So if we come down the side, the text box here, okay, we've got British Rail Dark Normal, and we're just going to click here, ADRC. Now you can see that's clearly not in the right place, so we can move that around using the various different objects here. We're just going to zoom in, so I'm holding Control and using my roller button to zoom in. And I'm going to collect the mouse button at the top here, and I can just then drag it into where I want it. So again, if we get the picture side by side, the font probably needs to be a little bit bigger, and probably the space might be alright there. So if we just come back into that text, select that, and we're just going to see how to change this to point. We're going to change that to millimeters. Let's do it at 0.75 millimeters, near enough. I'm just going to change that to maybe 1 millimeter. So it's then made it bigger, and I can just drag that to where I want it. If we get the next one, so it's 96-100. So again, you get text. Just draw another box and fill it in 96100. Okay. So again, the font size looks smaller. Keep going to the wrong one. And it looks like it probably should be about the same. So if we come back in here, select the font, and we're just going to change it. And change that font size to 1 millimeter. Oh, where's it gone? Let's undo that. Okay, try again. It doesn't like it. Let's have a look whether it's completely gone. Okay, let's undo those. We can just drag the font out like this to make it bigger if you want. And we can just drag it to the right place. Looks about right to me. So the next thing is we're going to want D, M, and EE. Draw a box, D, M, and then and space EE. Okay. And we can check that. You can see there's a spacing. Okay. And it looks like it's slightly bigger than this font here. So again, if we select it, use the mouse to select. And then we want slightly taller, and maybe slightly longer. Again, looks on the pictures that like they all are slightly offset; they're not perfectly straight down. And then we're going to want electrification with capital E and all the rest in lowercase. Draw that box. It's not drawn. It's fine. Try again. Draw a box again. Drawing. What's going on now? There we go. Weird. So capital E, electrification. So the box is not big enough. Where's it gone? Undo text. Undo type text. Undo type text. Okay. So look back. Let's just make this bigger. Back into text. Make that smaller font. So go 0.75. So it doesn't like the size here. Let's make it quite small. Let's go for 0.5. Okay, so we can increase the font size now. Let's go 0.7. A little bit longer. Let's do that. Picture. Maybe a little bit taller as well. Okay, that looks alright. So again, by no means is that perfect, but it's going to give us a transfer that looks like what we're after. If we now select the box that we initially had and we go back to Objects, Fill and Stroke, we can then take off the stroke, so we're just left with text. There's no point us having the box. We now know the size that we're working to, so we've got the text and the font all created. So the next thing we'll look at is the British Rail logo. Now you can sit here, you could draw that all yourself. I actually found it pretty difficult to draw, to be able to have it to have all the angles correctly. So again, you just go to the internet, go searching on the internet, and I looked for British Rail vector logo. Now you want a vector image because that's going to give you a nice clean size with no rasterization. I just come on this website, you click on download, it automatically downloads it for you. Okay, yeah, okay, you've got a few pop-ups. It downloads this file, you can open it up, save the file wherever you want. Okay, it creates that file there. Come into Inkscape, we just zoom this back out, and then we do File, Open, and then in the transfer folder as well, I saved it, britishrail.ai, click on Open. It imports it all, I didn't change anything on here, and then you get that logo. Now clearly that's not the logo that we're after the one with just the red. Okay, so just search again until you find the exact one you're after. So that's the one we're looking for, this logo here. So again, just open this up. This is on Clip Art Max. Okay, and where do we want it? This one here. So click on OK, open that. Nope, that way. There we go. Download.png. So I clicked on the image, download PNG file, click on download, save as, save, okay, we'll open that file. Let's close that. Open file wherever it's saved it to. So open folder. Cut it from there. And let's go to DTS62. I've got a folder in here called transfer work, and then paste it in here. Okay, so you've got clip art here. Okay, going back into Inkscape, do File, Open, find that logo. Okay. Okay, so if we now just copy that into the workflow that we're working on, paste it in there, see how it's massive. You can then just zoom it down onto the page, holding Control again as we roll the ball in. And we can adjust this till we've got it at the right size. Now looking at the image here, it's about a similar sort of length to this. Height a bit smaller. Just highlight again, so change it slightly. Let's have a look. other. It's probably not far, just maybe a tiny bit smaller. Okay. And then just place that wherever you want. Now you're probably going to want multiples of these two, so if you do Control C, Control V, and then you've got one for each side. Okay, nice and simple there. We've got this lettering and logo. Okay, so the next thing we do is we do this part for the jib here, the Cowan Sheldon SWL 30.4 tons. So again, it's just another text box really. So we need to work out roughly what sort of size do we want compared to the other parts. If we just create a text box, I think font wise we're probably going to go for something like 3mm to start with, and have a look at this. So it's all capital letters. Start again. 3mm, Cowan Sheldon, SWL. We're probably going to do those as two separate actually. So if we look at this font, that font probably doesn't look like the right font. Now I don't personally know what Cowan Sheldon uses as their font, so we can maybe go and have a look for that. Go and just Google fonts. That's obviously going to be their logo. It's going to be a completely different font. So trying to find things like this could be quite difficult. That's how I found the Placer one. I just went in on their website and found it was actually listed. Not sure personally. If I find out what it is, then I'll come back to it. At the moment, I'm not entirely sure what it is. I'm just going to probably pick a font that looks similar to that. Actually, really light. See how on the E, the E's cut in slightly where it's not on this one. And the O's more round on the British Railway one. So it's definitely not that. I doubt it's going to be things like these. Where's that? Yeah, I think you could go through these for hours trying to find the right one. Okay, so yeah, pretty difficult to find. I'm just going to stick it at British Rail, to be honest with you. I'm not going to overly complicate this. I'm sure somebody could point me in the right direction. Fill. So let's find the fill. Let's try and pick the red off of there. So it's the same as the British Rail red. Nice and easy picked. So we've got that there. We've now got to work out roughly what sort of size we're looking for. Okay, so now we've got to work out roughly how big we want this. So we do the same on Fusion. I'm going to create a sketch on this face here. And we can see that we want it to be roughly sort of that sort of size. So it's 16 centimeters, millimeters, sorry, by about 2.5 millimeters. So yeah, we can just change this font down to 2.5 millimeters, and the length of it will probably be dictated by that font itself. Okay. And we can draw a box around it that'll tell us the rough size. So we can see how it's 20 millimeters by 3.2 millimeters. So it's about sort of the right sort of size there. Again, we're going to want 2 of them, 1 for each side of the chip. Okay, so the next thing is SWL.30.4 tons. Same principle. It's 2.5 font size, so it's SWL full stop after each of them. 30.4. The point could be interesting. So 30. So 4. Now that could be that we have to change the font to find that the font's got decimal that's up here, and then space tons. Okay, let's go back into that. We have to make this longer there. That's it. Okay, so fill. We'll pick the red that we got on these. Okay, now we're going to try and find a font that puts the point higher up. Because I've been trying to work out how to do this decimal up here. Now the best thing I could think of was if we just come back into here, remove the decimal point from there, put another space in, and then if we create another box with just a full stop in it, change the font to 2.5, full stop, change the fill to the red. Okay, and then select that, zoom in, and just move it to where we want it, like that. I know it's cheating, but it's giving us what we were after. Probably going to want, actually, I think, a space in there. Although it's not the same, I think it looks slightly better with a space in there, which does mean that we probably just want to move this slightly. Okay, so then again, same as before, let's select those, copy and paste. Okay. Okay, before going much further, I think I'm just going to save this. I'm going to just do save as Inkscape Svg. I'm going to create that as Cowan Sheldon 30T. And then save. And then obviously if anything goes wrong, we've got that all saved to work from. Okay, so the next thing I'll add on is on the lifting beam here, this S. There is a full stop in here. Unfortunately, none of the pictures for this version show it particularly well, but it does go S full stop W full stop L dot full stop 30 and then T. So we'll add that in onto our transfer sheet. So if you look at the font size, we're sort of comparatively a little bit bigger than these. So again, we're using the font tool here. Okay, and font, what we're looking for, probably let's try 2.75. Go S full stop W. Liking that. Let's give it that for a minute. I'll do a slightly bigger box. S full stop W full stop L full stop. Okay, what we can do is check it in Fusion size wise. So if we come into Fusion, we can again use this to measure. If we just measure that, to inspect. So we can inspect from there to there, 6.7 millimeters by 3.2. So yeah, we are going to need to make that a bit smaller probably, because it doesn't take up the whole size here. So if we just select, go back to the select tool, so it's got 3 at the moment. So if we come down to say 2.5, so that we can fit it in that gap, that's probably going to work there, I would have thought. Just drag that a bit smaller. We'll put this at the top here. We're going to need 2 of them. Control C, Control V to do that. Okay, and then if we move on and do 30 and then capital 2 at the top there. So same thing again, just select the size. 2.75 there, so do 30. That box needs to be bigger. Okay, so unfortunately, what we can't do is to make the T sit high, so we'll have to draw that separately. So if we just draw another text box, we zoom in, and this is going to be smaller, so if we put it up here, with a font size of say maybe 2, it might even be too big, do a capital T on that. Yeah, it's still too big, so we highlight that and we'll come down. So compare that, how's that look? Still probably too big at 1.5, so we'll come down. Let's just try. One's probably too small, so if we just try and change that to 1.25. Yeah, I think I'll go with that. And then we select that, move it up to position at the top here. Okay, and then if we select a pair of them, we can then group them, if I remember how, like this. So object, group, they then become the same object, so when we move them, they both move together. The font we know is the same size as this one, that's fine. So we'll keep them next to it, but just slightly apart, so that when you print them, you can separate them off the sheets. Control Z, Control C, Control V to copy it. So we've now got those both completed. So concern this video is getting a little bit on the long side at the moment, so I'm going to finish this video here at the moment, and then we'll come back on the next one and work our way through the rest of the transfers. But this is giving you a good idea of how we can go about creating our own transfers, and we'll go into more of the complex ones on the next episode. Thanks for watching.